thought for the day. What you think, you become.
Welcome to 7 Minutes for Yourself. I'm Christina Aina, and I'm so glad you've joined me for what I believe will be 7 of the most enriching minutes of your day. Let's take this time to reconnect with ourselves and improve our well-being.
In today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself, we are taking a fresh look at how we react to challenging situations. Have a listen.
There's a certain type of thinking that's especially explosive when it comes to emotional reactivity, and that's black and white thinking. Now, black and white thinking is when you take a situation and you think about it in an extreme way. You push out all of the nuance and you turn it into something as intense as possible. Now, you can usually recognize it when you use words like always, never, perfect, terrible, or like everything, everyone, nothing, nobody, worst or best, right? The Arbinger Institute calls these horribilizations. You take something and you horribilize it. Now, notice how in these situations, black and white thinking exaggerates the situation. So, for example, a husband says to his wife, "You never do the dishes. I always have to clean up after you." Or a depressed young adult, "Everything is awful. The world is a terrible place. Climate change is hopeless. I'll never be able to succeed. I'm no good at math." Or someone at work, right? They might think, "My boss is the worst communicator." Or a young mother might say, "I'm just a terrible person. She has it all together. She's such a saint." Right? Each time the person takes a difficult situation and they make it horrible. They use the most extreme word. Never, always, everything, hopeless, terrible. So the more extreme you're thinking, the more intense your emotions will be, and the more likely you are to be depressed or anxious. But black and white thinking also makes you helpless to escape that depression or anxiety. And it's a lie. When you use black and white thinking, you are usually distorting nuanced reality by ignoring the good and exaggerating the bad. So if we want to be less emotionally reactive, we need to replace black and white thinking with something more helpful and more honest. So what do we do about it? The first thing is this rule: honesty. You have to be willing to admit that black and white thinking is a lie and that you're lying to yourself to excuse yourself from something. If you're willing to be more honest about that, then you can move on to the next step. So notice that you're doing it. Notice your trigger words. So 99% of the time, words like always or never are not accurate. Do you have other words that you use when you're justifying yourself? Just start to catch yourself doing it. Write a big Post-it note somewhere that you can see that has a list of the words that are warning signs that you're slipping into black and white thinking and emotional reactivity. Then take a deep breath. Slow yourself down. Next, name an emotion. The emotion might be real, but the thoughts aren't. So say something like, "I feel," followed by an emotion word. "I feel angry." You are not allowed to say, "I feel like you're making me angry. I feel like you always attack me. I feel like you never take out the trash." I'm sorry, those are lies. And they're also thoughts. They're not feelings. They're lies because they're exaggerated. But that's not a feeling statement, right? 3 words only. I feel, emotion word. I feel angry. That's honest, right? Okay, next, reframe the situation. Speak in the gray. There might be a real problem that needs to be solved. The emotion can motivate you to take action, but extreme thinking like black and white thinking will most likely interfere with your ability to solve the problem. So we're going to look for the gray. Here's how. Use both and instead of extreme thinking. Now, this is an annoying therapist skill that's actually super effective, right? You can feel 2 emotions at the same time. You can have 2 nuanced truths that seem contradictory at the same time. So, for example, when your boss miscommunicates a deadline to you, instead of thinking, "He's a terrible communicator," you could say, "My boss didn't communicate well, and he's also trying really hard to help our team succeed." Or if you messed up, right? Instead of me either being a complete idiot or a perfect worker, you could say something like, "Oh, I'm basically intelligent and valuable at times. I make mistakes too. Both of these can be true. Or if a loved one passes away, you could say something like, oh, I feel so sad about the death of my mother, and I feel relieved that I don't have to be her caretaker anymore. Or, it could be true that your wife might be insensitive to you sometimes, and she also loves you a lot, right? So that's the skill of both and. You look for two parts or lots of parts of these situations. Okay, next, look for exceptions. Look for counterexamples. So if I have this thought, oh, my wife never does the dishes, you look for a time that she did or some other way that she contributes, right? Look for an exception to this extreme way of thinking. Or be specific. Speak about one single situation. So use a less extreme word. So instead of saying, my boss is a terrible communicator, you say, my boss wasn't clear about her expectations for the timeline for this assignment. Be really specific, right? So instead of everything is awful, describe what specifically is awful. So say, oh, she didn't tell me the time frame. So when we get specific, then we can actually do something about a problem. So like, you could say something like, oh, hey boss, next time I need more clarity about deadlines. Okay. And then last, make sure to check for your own accountability. In the majority of situations, we are playing a role in the cycle. If there's a communication problem at work, perhaps we need to work on using clarifying statements or being more assertive. If there's a problem with chores in the marriage, we may need to consider how we're contributing or clarifying household tasks, or we need to manage our stress levels better, or, not be so busy all the time, right? There's probably something we can do to contribute to the solution here.
That concludes today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself. Please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Today and every day with your kiddo is a gift. Enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in.